My superpower is engineering. I've been a roboticist almost all my life now. I think engineering is just as creative as the arts. Engineers, we solve problems. It impacts the world. It makes a difference. Without IEEE, I don't think I would have the network that I have. Anyone can get involved with IEEE USA at any time. There's an immense amount of value for anyone at any career stage.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to today's IEEE USA livestream webinar, Top Tactics to Elevate Your Career for the Future of Work, presented by Certified Career Strategist and Executive Coach, Aaron Urban. I will now pass it off to our guest host, Chair of the IEEE USA Career and Professional Activities, IEEE Houston Section, and the Region 5 South Area Chair, Christopher Sanderson, who will introduce our presenter for today's webinar. Welcome, Christopher.
Thank you, Jonathan. I really appreciate that introduction there. I have the pleasure of actually introducing our guest speaker today, and I've known her for a number of years, and so it's truly an honor for us to work together again. Erin Urban is a certified career strategist as well as executive coach, helping experienced professionals remove career roadblocks, unlocking their potential, and elevating their careers. She's an international speaker and behavioral scientist, and the host of the Career Coffee Chats podcast. She is also the author of the best-selling book, Elevate Your Career, More Impact, More Income. Erin is a Forbes Coach Council member and a self-proclaimed recovering perfectionist with over a decade of mentoring and coaching successful professionals in transformations through one-on-one coaching and group workshops. Coaching, Professionals that partner with Erin enjoy success in a variety of industries, private as well as public entities, from Fortune 100 to Fortune 500 organizations. Thanks to the focus and experience of brain-based coaching, happy clients repeat and receive rewards from straightforward strategies to achieve their long-term career fulfillment. It is my honor and my privilege to introduce Coach Urban.
Thank you, Christopher. I sincerely appreciate that warm welcome, and I sincerely appreciate IEEE for having me today to speak to the membership and also the nation at large about how to elevate your career in the future of work. Because now we have to leverage vastly different tactics than we did even a year ago to elevate our careers, see our career growth, and find the opportunities that we want in our careers. Now, I would love to welcome you to this live event. So if you are an IEEE member, please do say hi and say hi, IEEE, or where you're from, because I love seeing people from around the world connecting in this larger community. And also, towards the end of the presentation, we'll have a Q&A session, and I would love to see your questions at that time in the comments section. Please do hold your questions until that time, because we'll have a lot of engagement during our time together today to talk about the future of work. Now, when it comes to the future of work, we've got so much going on. We're kind of drinking through a fire hose, if you will, right now. Digital workplaces, automation, we have remote work, and then through all of that, we need to find and elevate our network, grow our careers, find new opportunities, and elevate our brand as a professional. That's a lot. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like I have too many tabs open in my brain. So in order to demystify some career myths and clear out the clutter for you as a burgeoning professional, someone who wants to elevate your career, let's talk about what it really matters when it comes to career growth, particularly in the quote unquote hashtag future of work. Great to see all of you tuning in. We have Kansas City, we have Iowa, Illinois, someone tuning in from IEEE in Austin, Texas. We have Houston section, California, Minnesota, all over the nation and the world. Great to see all of you. Thank you for tuning in today. So when it comes to those pesky career myths and career growth myths specifically. Let's talk about what some of those are, and most importantly, how you can avoid some common sabotage, some common secret saboteurs, as I like to call them, because these particular career myths are what we think it really takes to get ahead in our careers. And in fact, these things that we are focusing on so hard oftentimes isn't helping us grow our careers, particularly now and moving into the future. And number one on the list is 80% of jobs are found through networking. That quote, and you probably all heard of it, but let me know if you have, if this is something familiar to you, you've heard this quote before. 80% of jobs are found through networking. That quote originated over 10 years ago. Yeah, it's a little out of date now. And in fact, around about 45% of jobs are actively found through networking. Now, that is networking that starts to occur during your job search. So you, as a busy professional, maybe have let your network languish a little bit while you were actively employed. And when you hit the job market, you started networking. It actually takes quite a while for your network to bear fruit. So while networking is extremely important for your career growth, it's not something you want to wait until you absolutely need a job to start focusing on. And then one of the reasons why people feel like they need to focus on networking so heavily, and this number is as high as it used to be, is quite frankly because they weren't able to leverage the new tools and technology at our fingertips to elevate their careers, elevate their presence online, and get reached out to for opportunities before you need them. That's ideally the sweet spot. In fact, the clients that I work with, that's exactly what we do. We make sure your presence is elevated to the point where people start reaching out to you and not the other way around. Wouldn't that be nice? Some other people tuning in from California, New Jersey, Richmond, Virginia, whoop, whoop, hometown. All right, great to see you guys. Also, another top myth is relying on hard work to get you ahead. Hard work myth. It's not actually true grit that it makes success happen, in fact. That's a very small component of it. What happens with professionals, particularly hardworking, focus-driven, experienced professionals looking to get ahead is they think their hard work should speak for themselves. Well, actually, it's not your hard work that speaks for itself. It is your career contributions and you that needs to speak for yourself, not just your hard work. Because what happens is when we keep our heads down and hope someone will notice our hard work, how do we know that they don't think we like working hard? Most people don't communicate their goals and what they want to accomplish in their careers and just rely on that quote unquote hard work ethic to get them ahead. And what oftentimes happens is it gets them stuck in a go nowhere job where they are needed in that job because they are the quote unquote problem solver. So if you didn't identify with being a problem solver or a fire putter outer, that firefighter, you coming in with a flag, the cape waving behind you, I will put out the fire. Give me a thumbs up or a heck yeah in the comments. Also, another big career myth that gets in the way of people seeing the career growth they want is you shouldn't negotiate during tough times. That's a complete falsehood. Yes, you should. In fact, we've done a recent study and we found that 40% of employers are actually more willing to negotiate during these times. And I think it was about 56% said they were just as willing. So the economic conditions actually do not have anything to do with whether or not you should negotiate. So you definitely should negotiate. Also thinking that, another big myth, that you are not an influencer. I hate to tell you this, but you're all an influencer, whether you like it or not. In fact, research found a number of years ago that even the most introverted person who, during these tough pandemic times, loves the fact they don't have to really leave their home to do much, even these individuals will impact over 20,000 people in their lifetime. So you are an influencer. And what I'll be sharing today is how you can leverage some tools for the future of work to make sure that your influence expands and that you're able to get the opportunities that you want. Now, another big myth is applying for jobs that you're a 100% match for, because surely if you're 100% match and you check all the boxes, they will give you a call. Have you ever applied for a job and you thought, this is me, it's perfect for me, and never heard anything? Well, there's a good reason. If you're checking all the boxes and you're 100% match and there's really no room for you to grow as a professional, a good leader will look at that and go, you will burn out or get bored in a very short amount of time. And attrition costs a lot of money. So what they want is they want to have a little bit of tension. They want to give you a little bit of room to grow. So for those of you who are trying to play it safe, I encourage you to apply for jobs that give you some room to grow versus checking all the boxes. So if that's you, be sure to give yourself some stretch room and don't play it safe necessarily when you're applying for jobs. And also ignoring your online presence. That's a big mistake I see a lot of people make, particularly now. What you might be aware of or not is that all recruiters find LinkedIn as their #1 source to vet and contact ideal candidates for jobs. So if you have ignored your online presence, particularly on LinkedIn at the moment, that's where it's at, then you are looking at missing out on a lot of opportunities. So I highly encourage you to elevate your presence in that space so they can find you and, most importantly, contact you for ideal opportunities. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Now, what else do we need to focus on to help you stand out for your career growth, particularly in the future of work? Well, some things we'll go over today is, #1, top mistakes most experienced professionals make when it comes to seeking and trying to elevate their career. What matters to stand out from the noise anyway, because these are tough times. How can I really stand out and grow my career? And how to position yourself to stand out to future and current employers. So even if you're not actively looking for a new job, there's a lot of different ways that you can make sure that you stand out to your current employer as well to get new opportunities and elevate your career. So I have a few predictions for you. And because this is IEEE, a few of these are great because you're in the right place. And I'm very, very excited to share with you that it probably comes as no surprise, more automation and digitalization is on the rise. Most companies, even deeply traditional organizations, are looking to have more automation, more digitalization. They call it RPI or RPA, digital process transformation. There's a whole host of different acronyms they may go by. But the essence is that they're looking to become more automated and they're looking to move into more of a digital space. With that being said, if you're an IEEE member, that's probably a yay, good. This is good news because there will be a lot of opportunities for individuals to grow in this area. Now, one of the burgeoning roles that's happening right now are professionals that have a little bit of project management and a little bit of know-how about digital process transformation or moving processes into a more automated environment. Also, somebody who has a strategic mindset, maybe a little bit of continuous improvement for those of you who are Lean Six Sigma black belts and other types of process automation and improvement professionals. So you have this fun little mix of talents and expertise that lend very well into what's called digital process transformation. There's a different other role types they are calling it. And unfortunately, it's not really settled down into one specific role type yet, but it's happening because businesses need to become more modern and move with the times. And those times also say that remote work is here to stay. So for those of you who are super bummed because you want to go back into the office, and even my husband, who's a diehard introvert, still wants to go back in the office. He's a little tired of working from home all the time. Just know that remote work is here to stay. It doesn't take a wild leap of imagination to realize that employers are saving money by not having people go into the office. They save money on rent and overhead and maintenance and upkeep and office supplies, which strangely found its way into our lap. Irregardless, they're saving a lot of money by doing that. Some will move towards a blended model. So if you don't have to go back into work, chances are you might not. So just keep that in mind. On the plus side, it does open up a lot of different opportunities based on what time zone you really want to work in. So if you live in Texas and you want to work in California, chances are you might be able to do that. So if you don't have to be hands-on in the type of work that you do, it does give you a better broad range of opportunities available to you. Additionally, certifications are now more essential than ever because, #1, the influence of our network is changing. And #2, a lot of people took the pandemic pause as an opportunity to gain more certifications and education. So for employers, they see certification, additional education is kind of like that checkbox. Oh, yes, this proves they know whatever it is. So just keep that in mind. If you have a question in your mind, should I get this certification to grow my career and based on my target, where I want to grow, then I would encourage you to go ahead and do that. And drive your own bus in that department, because we can't necessarily always wait for our employer to pay for our certifications. And it doesn't hurt to ask. So please ask. If you are currently employed and thinking about getting another certification or furthering your education, ask, because it doesn't hurt to ask. And if you don't, you'll never know. So ask if they'll pay for it. Also, networking is evolving, as I mentioned before. It's more of a long-term investment. And I will probably repeat myself later on in our presentation today, but it's not a one and done, okay? You don't just go out networking once and then that's it. Or you don't just do it when you're looking for a new job. No, actually it's continual investment. And what's interesting is social psychologists have said that broader loose ties, so those people who you kind of know, are actually more important for your career growth than your close buddies. Now, one of the reasons for that is the closer a relationship gets, the more complex it is. And those broader ties know you for your expertise and your brand, and much more likely to recommend you. So keep that in mind. Always work on your network, and we'll be talking about later how to do that in a very digitally dependent society. And manage and update your online presence, because your presence online is the future of work. In fact, now this is a wild extrapolation, okay, based on the fact that AR and VR, so augmented reality and virtual reality, are expected, according to some sources, to grow by $27 billion this year, already invested in by Google and Facebook. So because these two industries are expected to grow so rapidly, I predict, now again, this is a wild extrapolation on my part based on neuroscience, social psychology, behavioral science, etc., that in a number of years, we may be signing on to sync with our avatar and putting on a headset for our augmented or virtual reality scenarios when we go to work. So just think about that, because people have reported that meetings are super inefficient. Let me know in the chat or in the comments if you feel like meetings are super inefficient right now in the virtual workplace, or you feel like maybe you even have more meetings than you would normally because you just don't have that one-off chance, hey, how are you doing? Oh, by the way, in the hallway or during the break room or what have you, or the meeting before the meeting and the meeting after the meeting. Those important touch points really aren't happening in the remote work environment very well. So technology is looking to maybe step in and fill the void. So let me know if you feel that way. And hello from UAE and Charlottesville, Virginia, those of you tuning in. So also, most importantly, be the entrepreneur of your career. This is very, very important. We cannot be lackadaisical and wait or drift down the lazy river. We need to be able to paddle our boat and paddle our career towards our destination. And by saying so, we also need to leverage a lot of the tactics that entrepreneurs actually leverage to elevate their presence. Same tactics will apply to us, the individual contributors and leaders within the future of workspace. Now, if you'd like to know more about this in detail, feel free to hop over to my blog. And I also have a blog series called Career Growth Series that talks all about from day one, you just start thinking about growing your career and beyond. And it's still ongoing, started in December, but you're welcome to screenshot this or come back and screenshot it at a later time to learn all about the future of work predictions. Now, what is missing and what matters when it comes to standing out in the future of work? What do you need to look for when it comes to growing your career during these very challenging times, very tumultuous times? Now, here's the thing. You may have heard this quote, new normal. Don't get your hopes pinned on that yet. There isn't a new normal yet because we're in such a radical change cycle, both economically and socially. So our socioeconomic change right now is very tremendous. And because we're in such a strong change cycle, we haven't actually developed a quote unquote new normal yet. So during this time, which can be defined by VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complexity, and ambiguous, because we have a lot of this complexity, all this ambiguity going on right now, it's not yet time for us to label something a new normal. There really isn't a normal yet. We're still in a strong change cycle. So during these change cycles, what matters to stand out based on what we're seeing unfold right now. Well, number one, it's very important to have career clarity. It's very difficult to hit a target that you don't know where it is or how to aim at it. So you need to have a career target. Because most people spend more time planning their vacations than their careers, what we want to understand is what's your why? What's going on? Why do you feel stuck? Or maybe you're not seeing results that you would like, or maybe you have this nagging suspicion that something that you're doing or your work or your life or your employer is sucking the life out of you. Let's understand your why and get some clarity on what the best strategy is for you when developing your career plan. So just starting off, what really matters for you to stand out, and make sure that you don't jump in from the quote unquote frying pan into the fire. Now, your ideal move might be based on this question. My question for you is it who you work for or what you do? Now, it is if you're feeling unhappy about what you do, then I would recommend that you just try something new. Maybe that's a career pivot. Maybe that's branching off into a focus area of your current expertise. So if it's what you do and you don't like necessarily what you do, then it's time to investigate your zone of genius. What gives you energy? What drains you? What brings you joy? And what makes you want to get out of bed in the morning and go to work? Because that's very, very important. Ultimately, we spend around about 80% of our adult working lives at work. Why be miserable at what you do? So I encourage you to understand very clearly what your strengths are, where you shine the brightest, so you can develop a plan around that and develop your career action plan based on those, your intersection of your strengths, expertise, and interests, which we'll talk more about in a moment. Also, if it's who you work with, you like what you do, but the people surrounding you think are probably toxic, then that's easy. You need to get a great job somewhere else and look at, making that career strategy happen, leveraging your LinkedIn, your resume, etc., and navigating the digital job search world, because that's where it's at. It's not necessarily just your network. When I talk to people who are looking to make a very strong career move, I suggest that you look at 3 different avenues. One is your resume, making sure you have a document that strongly supports your career target and articulates your contributions, as well as fueling that into your LinkedIn profile based on where you want to go. And also never leveraging your network. So it's not just one thing or the other. It's all 3 in order to see results very quickly when you want to make a strong career move. Now, if it's neither of these, you like who you work with, you like what you do, but you're just not getting where you want to go. And when it's based on the future of work, you want to grow your career, you want to elevate your career, then I encourage you to get some additional insights through feedback. Maybe that's just a casual survey of the people you work with closely, and get some more awareness around what's going on. Is your presence, how you're showing up at work, is it in alignment with how you think you're showing up at work? Because with those people I coach, there's often a misalignment there in these types of scenarios, and that friction is creating a roadblock that's keeping them from accomplishing the types of opportunities that they'd like to see. Now, let's see. Eric Brown has asking, what about growing your career within a company where work is remote and you don't have the touch points necessarily yet with management to help advance your career? That's a great question, Eric. So I'm glad I chose that question, because this is very important, and we'll be talking about a little bit more about that in the networking section of our presentation today. But what we want to do, first of all, is grow our network within that organization first, Eric. So if you're working remotely, and this is going to be going on for the foreseeable future, probably for you, when you meet someone, ask them this key question: who do you know that I should know? And then continue to grow your network. Also, leverage tiny moments. And we'll go into more detail about that during our networking section, and when we discuss about how to leverage tiny moments to help advance your career and create those quote unquote touch points. So thank you for that, Eric. Okay, so let's talk about what happens if you need to pivot in a competitive market. Well, your career success pathway really does start at the intersection of your strengths, your expertise, and your interest. You want to leverage that which you're strong in, your quote unquote zone of genius, if you will. What gives you energy, that's more likely your strength zone. You also want to focus on your interest because, quite frankly, you're not going to want to get out of bed and go to work for something that you are bored with or don't want to do. And we also want to leverage your expertise. None of the clients I work with ever have to start all over again unless that's their true heartfelt desire. But I've still never had to start all over again. We leverage your expertise as a springboard and then focus on your zone of genius, your strengths, and your interest to make that career path happen for you and define that career target so you can develop a plan that fuels your ultimate success. Now, being aligned, by the way, with your career plan and your career path is essential because if you are not aligned and there is a dissonance there, very oftentimes professionals will burn out. So if you feel like you're burning out and you're just miserable at work, there's probably something going on. There's a dissonance between what you're doing or where you're going and maybe your strengths or interest. So I encourage you to do a little bit more of investigation and discovery around that and understanding very clearly what you can do to make sure you're in alignment with your strengths, expertise, and interest. So some sneak peek into some of the work I do with my clients. Number one, I definitely recommend for people wanting to make a career pivot or career shift, or maybe you're just not seeing the results you want to see in your career, to get a strengths or work style assessment and understand where your zone of genius truly is. And then also be ruthless, particularly with the future of work and the strong change cycle we're in. Do your research. You need to make sure that industries, if you're thinking about pivoting into another industry, make sure it has a strong life cycle and that it will support you in the future. And connect with professionals in that industry. So once you've defined your career target, this is where strategic networking comes in. And you can understand, okay, well, who's a little bit ahead of me and how can they help me grow my career and make those valid connections? IEEE is a great way to do that. For example, your professional organizations are a wonderful way to reach out to mentors and people and guides who will guide you along your career journey if you can't find that within your current company. I also definitely recommend leveraging the tool and a tactic I mentioned with Eric earlier to ask, who do you know that I should know to help grow your network? And again, as I mentioned before, it's oftentimes the broad, loose ties that help you develop your network the most strong and strategically. But we want to network strategically and fuel our energies based on where we want to go versus just throwing something on a wall and seeing what sticks. The other thing that's very important for your career growth and future work is having a target. As I mentioned before, it's very difficult to hit a target if you don't have one or know where it is. So we have to have a career target. And, quite frankly, most of us have graduated college. We just needed a job, any sort of job, hopefully somewhere remotely related to what we got our degree in. And we walked through one open door into another open door and found ourselves becoming a victim to what I call open door syndrome. So if that sounds familiar, don't worry. There's always a great time to make sure that you are aligned with where you want to go and have that intersection of your strengths, expertise, and interests that I mentioned just a moment ago. So if this is you and you feel like, I'm not, maybe you woke up during the pandemic, because a lot of us during the pandemic pause had a moment to go, I have a little bit more free time on my hands to actually think about my career, and maybe I don't think it's so great, or maybe there's some things I'd like to change. So let's understand what your target is. If you're thinking about growing your career, you have to have a defined target, because if we don't, and what could happen is it could lead to career confusion and disillusion, or worse, a dead end. So what we don't want is for you to find yourself at a career dead end and not quite sure how to get out of there. But if you are, don't worry, there are methods to get away from a quote unquote career dead end. What you want to do first is define your goal, because you cannot intentionally grow if you don't have one, don't have a goal to aim for. So one of the things that a friend of mine said to me years ago, and it's a very beautiful thing that he said, may you always have something to look forward to. And that's my wish for you. So may you always have something positive to look forward to. And that's one of the benefits of having a strong defined career goal. And the great thing about it is once we understand where we want to go, we can then reverse engineer from that goal to create our plan. Just like a GPS system, which doesn't start from where you are now to get you to your destination, actually reverse engineers from your destination to where you are. That's the same thing you want to do to develop your career plan. So when you're thinking about making a plan of actions or not quite sure what next step you should take, consider where you're going and then reverse engineering from that to understand, is there a certification I need? Is there maybe a transitional role I can move into that gets me closer to my ultimate goal? As I've also mentioned to some clients that I work with, sometimes your next step is just a step in the right direction. And I would also say that's probably true for most of our career. We're always taking a step, hopefully in the right direction when we have a target and a plan. And additionally, once we have that target, please communicate your goals. Most people don't do this. They keep it to themselves or hope people will notice, and people don't because they're very busy and wrapped up in their own business. So please communicate your goals. If you're at your current company and you don't feel comfortable communicating your goals and what you'd like to accomplish there, then please communicate your goals with your broader network, your friends, your family, your broader network, your family within IEEE, for example, your other professional organizations. Please communicate your goals, because what happens is when you can communicate a clear, articulate, and succinct goal with your broader network, that broader network will then start to work on that. And like I mentioned before, it's not a one and done type of thing. It takes time to bear fruit. So what we want is for that network to be working on this goal that you have. And then before you need it, produce an opportunity, right? Well, you might be asking yourself, well, what if I just need to make a career move right now? Okay, well, let's talk about that. Having a target is extraordinarily important. And that's for multiple reasons. So if you're actively in a job search at the moment, you want to make a strategic career move and land the right job for you that honors your strengths, expertise, and interests, then having that target is absolutely critical. And that's for a number of reasons, not just because of applicant tracking software, which is for 99.99% of your applications online. And you'll know when you're interfacing with an ATS or applicant tracking system because you have to create a username and password. And when you do that, you're interfacing with the applicant tracking system. And what that does is it defines how relevant your resume is to the job description. So having that target is extremely important because that allows you to reverse engineer your career contribution stories, which we'll be talking more about in a moment as well. And additionally, recruiters want to see how you're relevant for that job in the first half of the first page. If you don't have a clear defined career target, it's very difficult to do that. And most importantly, it's also difficult to stand out to decision makers who want to see what is the ROI for hiring you. And if you don't have a target, it's very difficult to speak to that ROI because you're probably too broad or too general. So, speaking of career contributions, very important to be able to speak to your value proposition. Because what's missing in most professional dossiers, resume, LinkedIn, how we communicate our goals during networking, etc., is a glaring lack of clearly articulated career contributions. I get it. It's very difficult to talk about yourself. I completely understand. And I will also share with you that it's probably you have more impact stories hidden in there than you give yourself credit for. So let's talk about how to make those career contributions stand out to elevate your career in the future of work. What I recommend for everybody is to create what I call an impact inventory. Now, what is that? Well, what an impact inventory is, it's a living document that evolves with you throughout the rest of your career. And what you do is you stuff it full of all the great career contributions you've done. And if you do project work, you may want to call it a project addendum. Approach it from that direction. That's also perfectly fine. But what you want to do is you start at your most current position and work your way back through time, because you'll have more detail for your most current position and then work your way back. Consider everything that you've done. Positively impact your work, your company, or the client, and Accomplishments, by the way, can be something that was just a part of the job, because I hear this quite frequently. Oh, well, I just did a good job. Well, great. If you just did a good job and you don't think that matters, well, what you might want to think about is, what would happen if you didn't do a good job? And I'll give you an example. My husband is one of the leading reliability engineers for subsea oil and gas. So what he does is basically avoids billions of dollars of environmental catastrophe. So while running models incessantly, and sometimes over the weekend lately, doesn't sound fantastic, he has an extremely impactful and influential position within these major projects. Because if he didn't do his job well, it would be a real bad thing happening on the backside. So just think of it like that. If you're in not necessarily business of gaining things, perhaps you're in the business of avoiding risk. So I want to think about how you positively impacted your team, yourself, your client, or your company, and keep a running list of this, because it not only helps you with your job search, not only prepares you fantastically for an interview, it also does wonderful things for your performance reviews, or when you want to ask for a raise or negotiate a salary. Is a good idea to have backup for those types of scenarios. So, and again, if you are more project focused, I encourage you to approach it from your project type work and think about, what was the business case here? What was going on that needed to have this project in the first place? What was the issue, problem, or goal? And then high level, who's the key stakeholders? Was there a budget? Did it overcome a problem, etc.? What was a high level for the project? And then most importantly, what's the impact of the work that you've done or did? What do they have now they couldn't do before, right? So for those of you who might be thinking, oh, this sounds great, but I don't even know where to start, please screenshot this or screenshot it later. It's at your discretion. This is a free impact inventory guide that I developed, and the same one that I give my clients to help them articulate their career contributions more succinctly, and have this document with you throughout the rest of your professional career and continually add to it. Put a note on your calendar, add to contributions. I highly recommend doing that. And if you already keep a kudos file, this is a great way to just transform that into something that's a little bit more impactful and empowering for you. Now, when it comes to the future of work, one of the big things we need to shift our mindset and our thinking is, we need to think in terms of outcomes. Oftentimes, we don't think in terms of outcomes. We think in terms of expertise. We talk about, I have 15 years, 20, 25 years of experience in blah, or I got this certification, that certification. Well, these are important, and your outcomes are important just as much as the career contributions I mentioned before. Remember the emphasis I put on the impact of those contributions? It's very important. We need to shift our thinking to close the gap between people's visualization of what we do and the ROI of what we've done, because people do not extrapolate. Okay, other people do not extrapolate, so we have to do it for them. Just because we think, well, I have expertise in this and I did that kind of thing, that doesn't translate necessarily to the layperson. And that's one of the biggest gaps I see, particularly with my professional expertise professionals, my SMEs. We oftentimes are too technical, have too much jargon, or are too vague for the layperson to be able to translate what it is that we are talking about. So we need to think in terms of outcomes. What's the outcome of the work that you've done? And I'll give you an example. On most LinkedIn profiles, you may see more of a little bit of expertise in the headline, that sort of thing, and what they're good at. But what you don't necessarily see is the ROI that occurs when you work with this professional. But if you think of it like that, you think of your LinkedIn headline like a billboard that's advertising you, the entrepreneur of your career, what would that say? All right. And also, Mark Swope mentioned it's also difficult to get monetary benchmarks for contributions. You're right, Mark. It's not necessarily always that easy. Well, here's the deal. You don't have to have monetary examples of your contributions. I will also say this, if that's difficult for you, you can extrapolate maybe a percentage increase or decrease or whatever makes sense for that specific contribution, or speak to it. That's also perfectly fine. And by the way, on LinkedIn, I do not recommend that you actually share the monetary value, because LinkedIn's a public forum. You might not want to share that monetary value. In addition, I will also say this. For those of you who are concerned about being exact about the figures, nobody has a microscope into your past history. So stop it. You can estimate, unless it's some extremely significant number like $19 million in 40 days, which actually is in my resume. I was able to increase productivity or production actually through a manufacturing facility by $19 million in 40 days with the help of a team, of course. I was leading a team. And that number I knew I was going to have to back that up. But unless it's something extreme like that, estimate. No one has a microscope into your past history unless you're applying for an internal role. And if you're applying for an internal role, do the best you can, but please be exact. But external roles, meh, they don't know. Your resume is not a legal document, and you don't need your middle name. Okay, so there's a lot of myths out there that are keeping us shackled to this belief that someone can spy into everything that we've done. That's not the case at all. And we also don't want to lie, so be reasonable and be sure you can back it up. Here's some insights into what the work I do with my clients when they want to make a career move. First of all, create that career contributions list. That's extremely important, and focus on the impact. What's the outcome of what you do? And you can shift those statements into your resume, your LinkedIn, etc. You can also want to add to them regularly to make sure they're updated. This helps you tremendously when it comes to performance review time, for example. And don't forget your LinkedIn profile. Also keep that updated. If I had $50 for every time I talked to a client who said, well, I haven't touched my LinkedIn in 10 years, So please do be more active on LinkedIn. And no, you don't have to be on there daily and posting things every 5 seconds to be active on LinkedIn. Speaking of activity, let's talk about your network. Now, I know I mentioned that it's not necessarily 80% of jobs are found through networking anymore. And it's also important to leverage your network and grow your network as much as you can. You might be thinking to yourself, well, I know that alleys of the heart and soul of a successful career, according to Sally, but how do I do that in a digital space? Okay, great. Connections are your currency, so let's talk about it. First of all, you want to keep them warm, all your connections warm like a good coffee, and it's a continuous process, as I mentioned earlier, not a once in a while investment. And like I mentioned before, leverage that target to build strategic networks. Networking is not as when pre-pandemic we would go to these networking events and collect cards. That's not networking. And if you'll think back to those types of events, you probably met one person that you may have developed a further relationship with. That's networking. That's that one person that you developed a further relationship with. So let's take a digital networking event, for example. Now, hopefully, a smart facilitator of said event will also break these down into small groups, no more than 3. You can actually get to know one another. You may walk away with only one good contact, and that's fine. That's a win. If you go to a networking event like this and you come away with no contacts, don't bother. That's a lose. What we want to do is we want to make sure that we're developing these connections during the virtual space, during our very tumultuous change cycle right now. So what does that look like? Well, leverage technology. IEEE, woohoo, yes, leverage the technology that probably you built. And for those of you who don't like to leverage that technology, please stop running away from it. Now know this, if you identify with being more reserved, particularly when there's a camera staring you in the face and you have to show your face online, you need to be able to emote. So that's more gestures, facial expression, vocal variation. You need to be able to emote more than you normally do by 30% to actually get your point across and show up more powerfully in the online space. Because it is a very flat dimensional experience at the moment, we need to be able to show up more powerfully. In order to do that, we need to emote more. Now, for those of you who are like, oh, no. Here's a good thought for you. Actual relationships are not necessarily developed in a group setting. In fact, more relationships are developed one-on-one and don't necessarily require you to have a camera staring you in the face. In fact, you can have great phone conversations too, or use what I call tiny moments. Maybe that's a chat or an emoji with someone you work with. Get to know those people who you feel like be valuable connections for you, and get to know what they value. That's very important. And the idea behind this is that you can then deliver value that's of a low energy for you to do, that's valuable for them. Maybe they love fishing and you send them this information or this article, or hey, did you see about this thing that they're doing on their hobby, or maybe their favorite thing, whatever that is. It's of high value to the recipient and costs you very little energy to do. When you do this, you create what I call the law. You develop the law of reciprocity. So the law of reciprocity is someone feels like they're indebted to you. They also feel like you care about them. So when you need to leverage said network, they're more likely to repay the debt. Make sense? So leverage those tiny moments, whether that's an I am, whether it's emoji, or hey, how was your weekend? Small, tiny things matter. It doesn't have to be this big production. You don't have to facilitate a networking group. And if you feel comfortable doing that, do it. I also recommend volunteering as much as possible, because that allows you to broaden your network and meet those big kind of a known quantity, if you will. So you can grow your networks in a virtual environment. And what's interesting to note is that some professionals who have historically not maybe kept as much abreast of their virtual or their network have found the virtual environment to be a little bit easier for them to do, because perhaps historically they had to drive, or there was conflicts between work time and personal time. So now they're able to weave that in a little bit more easily and facilitate better relationships with people that maybe they didn't keep in touch with as much before. Also great to know is InMails, emails, phone calls are also great ways to keep in touch with somebody. And as I had a client ask me yesterday, well, what do I do when I want to reach out to my network? Like, they kind of know I'm looking. I sent maybe a note to them 6 months ago. What do I do? Anything is a great excuse to reach out to your network. Holidays, sadly, natural disasters, checking up on your friends. Like in Houston, Texas, for example, you had the deep freeze, which I'm sure the northern states are looking like, what's wrong with you? Well, Houston, Texas is not built for those types of temperatures. So you can reach out to your friends and say, hey, I know you went through this. How are you doing? Any excuse is a good excuse. Holidays are great. Birthdays, if you know them. Natural disasters, unfortunately. Or just, hey, look, I know this is still a challenging time. We're still working through and moving out of this pandemic socioeconomic cycle. How are you? How's the family? What can I do for you? And by the way, I'm still looking for this type of role. Be specific. How can I help you thrive? So let's make it a mutual collaborative experience. Now, for those of you who are still scratching your head about strategic networking, first of all, leverage your target. Leverage that defined target and reverse engineer to find those strategic network people. Then, for those people you know can help you grow your career, make sure you make time for them. Actually, if you need to, put it on your calendar. Find out what they value, as I mentioned before, to build trust and that hey, they care about me factor, and be a bridge, not a dead end. I have a person in my network who does a fantastic job of being a bridge and connecting other professionals, and you remember her for this, and you will definitely put her first in line when there's something, an opportunity, or something that, is fun or it's valuable for her. So be a bridge, not a dead end. And leverage technology. That's the future of work. And I hate to say this, for those of you who wanted to go back to the way it was, we are not going back to the way it was. So there isn't a new normal yet, and there's a lot we can do to grow our career and elevate our career in the future of work. What we want most out of this entire presentation is for you to understand that it's so important for you to be the entrepreneur of your career. Gone are the days where we can sit back and relax and let our employer tell us how to grow our career. Not that we ever really wanted to do that, but we did. We want to be the entrepreneur of our career and leverage a lot of the same techniques and thought processes that go behind developing yourself as an individual, investing in yourself, and then growing your career based on what you want to do and that intersection of your strengths, expertise, and interests. Also, please note, as we mentioned before, that I do have a best-selling book out there, and you can pre-order my Elevate Your Career Roadmap guide, which is a companion guide for the book. It's a personal coaching experience for the book that takes and breaks down each chapter with more detail, more insights, and some prequels to my upcoming book, How to Elevate Your Influence. You can find out more about that at elevateupsolutions.net/books. And you can win a free book if you fill out the survey that's been scrolling across the bottom of your screen. Without further ado, I will open up for questions, and I'll be scrolling through the comments section to answer as many questions as I have in the time that we have together. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn, because I do have a live show. I share tons of information for you about how to grow your career. And you can go to this link at Linktree or linktr.ee. This is my one link to access a consultation call if you'd like to learn more about how to work one-on-one with me. You can access my podcast, my blog, more resources, the book, etc. So I like to have a one-stop shop on that. So, all right, we have some great questions in here. Let's see, someone asked from YouTube, any points for someone switching from an employee role to an entrepreneur? Congratulations on thinking about striking out on your own. A lot of the same tips and tactics that I shared with you are very applicable when it comes to being an entrepreneur. When you're thinking about going into the entrepreneurial space, and I won't spend a ton of time here because that could be a whole nother webinar, a whole other talk just on that topic. But when you're thinking about that, first of all, you want to be very, very clear on the value you're bringing and who is going to be purchasing that, and knowing who your ideal client is, and knowing what value you're bringing to that entrepreneurial space. Are you wanting to be the solo entrepreneur? What does that look like for you? Is at the intersection of your strengths, expertise, and interest, understanding where you want to go, and then reverse engineering that. So knowing where you want to grow as an entrepreneur and being able to reverse engineer that for your plan is the same type of tactics you would use to grow your career. So hopefully that's helpful for you.
Hey, Coach Urban.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.
I like one of the points that you made in reference to volunteering, which is, I think it's very, very important, both from a networking standpoint as just well as, for me, a mindset standpoint. And IEEE Houston section, or IEEE wherever you are in the world, are always looking for strong volunteers. And I highly encourage people who are here on this cast to reach out to your local area section and get involved. Great networking opportunities. Although 80% of us seem to think the old way of networking is still relevant. So I'm slowly changing.
Well, it's good to hear that we're slowly changing, because evolving your networking, evolving and leveraging the technology you have at your fingertips is extraordinarily important. It's a true story. I have one of my best friends. I was a maid of honor at her wedding. She moved to a different state, and it's tough, when you're busy in life, to keep in touch. And during the pandemic, we've actually, because Zoom is now the norm, had a chance to catch up more frequently, and we've actually rekindled our friendship. So leverage the technology that's at your fingertips. So I'd like to answer a few more questions if we have time. And let's see, we have Dan Franklin asks, is making a positive contribution to the world a defined enough target? Not quite, Dan. We need to be more specific than that. So I know you want to make a positive contribution to the world, so that's great. What industry? Doing what specifically? So we need to be specific. We need to think like an entrepreneur, and anybody that goes through any entrepreneurial training or business training knows that we need to be a niche about what we deliver. And you'll notice that I don't say, I don't know, just executive coaching, which is very broad. It doesn't tell you anything. So I'm a little bit more specific about what I do, what I deliver, and my coaching work that I do with my clients. So someone else asked, is PowerPoint deck available to the attendees? I don't believe that it is, but we can check with IEEE. I do know that the recording certainly is. You can access that during the various social channels and on YouTube. Douglas shares, doors seem to close more often now. I'm looking for open windows as well. Douglas, I would have to argue to say that perhaps we're not leveraging all of our tools. So the people that I work with see an exponential difference after working with me, because one of the things that we do is highly define your career contributions based on your target. We also develop all your documents based on your target as well, and leverage your LinkedIn presence as well as your resume, and of course your networking. So after doing that, what we also find is, and for some of us, particularly our more experienced professionals, saying things like, I have 30 years of experience in XYZ actually may overprice you.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily a good thing to say. We thought it was a good thing to say. We thought that, explaining our many years of expertise is a wonderful thing, but actually it might price us out of the game, because it's a very competitive market out there. So consider that if you're a more experienced professional, that we be cognizant of not sharing, say, dates on when we graduated high school, or definitely not high school, college, for example, or expertise around LinkedIn past year 2000. We want to be a little bit more current, and we also want to talk about outcomes and what we will deliver to our potential next employer.
I saw a question earlier in the presentation.
Yeah.
It comes from Robert Burke. He said that what constitutes an online presence on LinkedIn?
Great question. So let's talk about that really quickly. So an online presence on LinkedIn does not mean you have to be an influencer and be there every day. That's not what you have to do. So online presence first is have a target and clearly aim all your content on your profile based on that target. Speak in terms of outcomes. So in your headline, for example, you might have not only some of your expertise, but what is the ROI by working with you? So what can employers expect to get value from working for you? What do you deliver? Is that reduction in overhead? Is that better throughput? Is that innovative technology strategies? What does it look like for you? What do you do? What is the result of working with you? What is it that you're great at? And don't be afraid to speak in terms of this. It's okay, by the way, to have expertise and have done great things. It's perfectly fine. We need to think in terms of being an entrepreneur. Then once you really fleshed out your LinkedIn profile and you have information underneath your experience section, you filled out your volunteer work, you have your certifications, any publications, etc. All of those things based on where you want to go. And a really good profile photo, not a mugshot. You don't look miserable. You have a smile. That's important. Okay, no mugshots. Then what do you do? Well, I recommend you be active around about 3 days a week on LinkedIn. And no, you don't have to write an article, but if you do feel comfortable writing an article, great. Write an article on LinkedIn and link it to your profile. Maybe it's about your experience, the lessons learned. If you are a subject matter expert, share. There's a lot of people who'd be glad to have that knowledge. But if you don't feel comfortable doing that, you don't have to. Look for industry-specific articles, videos, etc., and share that content on various forums, on the newsfeed, etc. And, though, also, this is very important, instead of just sharing it and going, there you go, add your 2 cents. Say what's important to you. What did you get out of it? Oh, I saw this video. And it could be what you agree or disagree. Right? You could disagree with this. Oh, I saw this video and they said this and I disagree because in my experience, blah, 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 blah. What do you think? And that's in fueling engagement. That's what engagement's all about. And you don't have to do that every day. 3 times a week is fine. And you're learning things too. And when someone comments on the post or article or video, or whatever that you shared, connect with them if you haven't already. Please do that.
I see. We have a question from Dr. Zephyr, who's actually part of the IEEE Galveston Bay section. He says, how do you keep it a secret from your current employer to avoid any negative repercussions when looking for a new job, it sounds like?
Yes, this is a tricky one. When I work with my clients, what we do is, let's take, for example, and it happens a lot, in our headline is our current work title. We're blah, 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 right? At so-and-so company. Well, what we want to do is maybe we can take off the so-and-so company, leave the work title, and then maybe put a dash or a vertical pipe or a symbol, or whatever makes sense for you, and put one piece of expertise or your knowledge or something you're known for behind that. No major changes, and you definitely want to turn off notify your network. So go into your profile settings before you do anything and turn off notify your network, because you don't want to notify your network of any changes. And then just go in and make little changes over time. It will take a little bit longer, but when you make little changes over time, it doesn't send a red flag if they even bother to check your profile at all from one week to the next. Wow, it's completely different, right? So you make those little changes over time. Your about section, which is your professional introduction. If you are actively employed, you don't want it to be too salesy, too much like, hey, pick me for a new job. We don't want to do that. We probably want to talk about our expertise in reference to basically where we are now, and then maybe a little bit about where we can go. All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see another question here from Brett Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
I'm coming off of several years away from focusing on my career, personal, family, and other reasons. How do I restart? How do I deal with the filler jobs I've taken to make ends meet? We've all been there.
Right, right. Well, we call those transitional jobs or bridge positions.
Okay.
Either one is perfectly acceptable, and it's a known term by recruiters and hiring managers. Most HR people understand what you're doing there. That's perfectly fine. What I would do is I would recommend that based on where you want to go, you're defining your contributions, what you've done, of course, in your past roles, and then in those bridge positions, draw out anything that's even remotely related to what you want to do moving forward. That's in alignment with that. And if there's no correlation at all whatsoever, don't feel like you have to go into much detail. It's a bridge position or transitional role. They know what that is, and it's for there so you can feed your family and pay the bills, right? That's perfectly understandable. And then don't be afraid, by the way, if you are actively in transition. This is very, very important, actually, for everybody, for Brett and everybody listening. If you are actively in transition, so you're currently job seeking and you're not currently employed by someone, you probably don't have a quote unquote current role on LinkedIn. The problem with this is because of something I call a lazy recruiter search, you may be falling out of searches entirely. And what happens is, because recruiters are looking for a specific job title, and this is what I call the lazy recruiter search. It does happen quite a lot. They'll go in and they'll look for a specific job title, electrical engineer, right? But they click current job title. Why they do that is because they don't want to see a bunch of people who were an electrical engineer and now they're, somewhere in leadership, right? But they're not thinking is they're also then discounting all and filtering out all the people who don't currently have a role. And that's bad. So if you don't currently have a role, what I want you to do, and this is very important, I want you to go into LinkedIn. I want you to create a role. The company will be in transition. So you're being truthful. In transition. That's the company title. Okay. The role title are all the role titles that you're looking for. I highly recommend you keep them relevant, related to one another, because if you're looking for disparate role titles, that doesn't work very well for a number of reasons. It's very difficult to target anything. But any of the role titles, you can separate by a hyphen, a dash, a vertical slash, whatever works for you, all of them in there, and then give a short description about what expertise you leverage for the different type of roles, maybe a few highlights of your career, etc. Right? So you're creating a quote unquote fake current position, but it's very important to do that. And you're being upfront. The company title is in transition. You can title it whatever you want, but I recommend in transition. It's very professional sounding. And that way you're not being left out of searches. It's very important. Okay.
I see another question from Robert Benson. What are your suggestions for transitioning to a service company owner using past job experiences?
Okay. So transition to a service company owner and using past job experiences. I'm assuming based on this that you are starting your own company. So with that being said, I'm not sure if you're starting your own company, you need to tell anybody about your past job experiences or if it matters. But because you own your own business, you can hire you all day long. But if you are looking at, say, being a service company and you need a dossier to be considered by other companies to hire you for said services, then what you want to do is use the same filter and lens when you're talking about your prior expertise, experiences, to highlight the types of experiences might support you where you're going. That makes sense. So the same methodology with targeting matters in all of these instances.
Okay. I see another question here from Georgette. If you are job seeking and employed, what should you include in your LinkedIn headline?
Not seeking, not looking for new opportunities, not any of those, because LinkedIn has this great feature that they rolled out last year, and it's open to work, hashtag open to work. And no, it's not the green ring of death.
I thought it was.
It is not the green ring of death, no. One of the plus sides of going through all of these challenges is that being in transition is no longer a stigma. Okay, it's very rare that we run across someone who is gauche enough to say, "So, why have you have a job in the last 6 months to 8 months?" Really? Did you know there's a pandemic? So usually that's very rare. So one nice thing about leveraging the open to work and having the green ring is optional, by the way. If you don't want the green ring on your profile photo, it's perfectly understandable. All you have to do is click visible to recruiters only, and that will take it off. The other nice thing is, for those of you who are gainfully employed or currently employed, you will want to do that, click the visible to recruiters only, because that then tells LinkedIn not to show that you're looking for new opportunities to any recruiters that are associated with your current company or any of their subsidiaries. So that's another top tip. And you want to have this clicked on. You want to have that open to work, because it allows you to put in 5 additional titles. It allows you to put in more locations that might be relevant to you, although with remote work that's not as relevant, I think, but is helpful. And also elevates your views in recruiter searches, because they want to reach out to people who are active. And by having that on there, it indicates to the algorithm that you're more active.
Okay.
So everyone,
and before we get into that, though, I didn't entirely answer your LinkedIn headline. You want to talk about where you want to go in your key core expertise, not just the past position title. So there you go. Now, sorry.
Thank you, Aaron. So folks, we have time to answer one more question. Aaron, I believe we had a question from Eric Brown earlier in the stream.
Yes.
He asked, what about growing your career within a company where work is remote and you don't have touch points with management to help advance your career?
Yes, we did. We answered that.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Well, I do have a follow-up question, Aaron, which leads back to the previous question. I always get the comment of asking when they see those gaps in employment, they are kind of surprised that you're not working. What have you been doing that whole time? I said, well, just like anyone else in this pandemic or housing crash or oil and gas crash, and I can go on and on and on. I've been working to maintain employment. And sometimes it surprises me that HR managers don't think about those things when they ask those type of questions. It kind of throws me for a loop. If I had a crystal ball, then I'll still be employed at the same company I was working for before. But I'm human.
Well, if you do get a question like that, and I do recommend that in your dossier being your resume and your LinkedIn profile, again, having that in transition role that I mentioned earlier is absolutely critical. And also highlight any volunteering experience that you did. If you're working on a certification, that can also be put under your experience section in LinkedIn and in your resume as a note that during this gap time, I was working on certification or additional education. I was volunteering at IEEE, for example. Maybe you're volunteering at your church or local community. Maybe you're mentoring. Maybe you did contract work. All of these things are valid. Now, if you did contract work, I highly recommend that you do have some, examples of the client work that you've done, and not just a note saying, I was a contractor. We need, some contributions in that space, or at least something to talk about to sink their teeth into. And job search is important as well. But what they want to know, and the reason they ask that question, is they want to know and see how you kept your skills current.
Mm.
Being, active, being active in your networking, keep on top of what's going on in your industry and your profession is very important. And there's a lot of free things that you can do out there that don't necessarily cost money to indicate that you are interested in continually brushing up your skills and being current in your industry or profession. So that's really what they're asking that for. And I wouldn't take it personally, but that's what they're asking for.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan, I guess I'm going to turn it over to you. This is like we may be a little bit over time, but it's definitely been time well spent.
Yes, absolutely. So, all right, everyone. Unfortunately, as Christopher said, we are out of time. Thank you so much, Coach Aaron and Christopher, for joining us today and for giving our audience insight on standing out and growing their career in a post-pandemic environment. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in for your great questions for our speakers. As a side note, IEEE USA's annual salary and benefits survey is currently open. IEEE members should have or will be receiving emails regarding the survey, so make sure to check your inboxes in the next couple of weeks. Members who fill out the survey will receive 10 free uses for IEEE USA's salary calculator. For more information, you can go to salaryservice.ieeeusa.org. The link has been provided on stream as well. Check back daily on our social media for future live stream updates, and we hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Yes, thank you.